Good evening. I'm Mayor Dean Brookie, and I'd like to welcome you to this March 2nd, 2021 Durango City Council meeting. I'd like to open this meeting. It's now 6:33, and may we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilor Bettine? Councilor Noseworthy?
Present.
Councilor Youssef?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Present.
Mayor Brookie?
Here. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to have councilors identify any actual or perceived conflicts of interest on any of the agenda items that we have before us this evening. Seeing none, we'll move into public participation. Public participation is intended to allow anybody from our community to speak on any topic for a period of 3 minutes. And I might suggest that this is the period for public participation. There are no public hearings this evening, so usually I try to defer folks to speak to the issue during a public hearing instead of in public participation section. But because we have no public hearings, this is the only opportunity the public has to participate in this evening's agenda. So with that, we have you can enter the public participation section by raising your hand if you're on Zoom, or if you're calling in, press *9 and you will be admitted by our moderator, and then push *6 to unmute yourselves. So with that, Mitchell, do we have anybody in queue for public participation this evening?
Yes, we do, Mayor. I just wanted to let Amy, our city clerk, know that she should be receiving the signal from the control room again. The first person on the list is a phone number ending in 2752. It is your turn to speak. Please unmute yourself by pressing *6. Give us your first and last name and whether or not you're a city resident for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Sweetie Marbury, and yes, I am a city resident for 46 years. First, I'd like to thank the street department for their excellence in snow plowing. Those 12-hour shifts really kept our streets in good shape this winter. And I'd also like to comment on the 2019 street tax. It has shown that it's really been money well spent, where we can see the results. The signage gives credit to the vote of the people. The Thomas Avenue rebuild is spectacular, and 8th and Main repaving is another example of the 2019 sales tax at work. But what I really called in about was the strategic goal under creating housing to enhance multi-generational community workforce and affordable housing. The housing plan has in it accessory dwelling units. And in 2014, the standards were set for ADUs, and they were approved for ENs 1, 2, and 3. The last city council approved EN 4, 5, and 6 with no lot sizes. After all, it's been 7 years that we have worked with accessory dwelling units in our city. I'm asking for fairness for EN 1, 2, and 3 with no lot sizes, because we do have restrictions, anything from 5,000 square feet to no lot sizes south of College to 7,000. Give us the same opportunities that other parts of town have with no lot sizes. Kevin Hall has already conducted public hearings, and Mayor Brookie and Councilor Youssef and Councilor Bettine were on the last city council that ran out of time to change to no lot sizes for EN 1, 2, and 3. I read where Rosemary Lane is asking for a public meeting for their preliminary plan. They have included with their 16 family lots, the single family lots, ADUs. Please help EN 1, 2, and 3 to have the same opportunities that other developments have with no lot sizes. We need to increase our housing, and this is one very reasonable way to do it with accessory dwelling units to meet your strategic goals. Please do this before April and the end of the terms for 3 members. Be a housing hero. It's way overdue to change to no lot sizes for EN 1, 2, and 3. It's on the radar. Make it happen before April, and we change and have new counselors that have to be re-educated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Marbury. Mitchell, do we have another participant?
Mayor, nobody else has raised their hand. If we do have quite a few people in the attendee list, though, if you are here to speak during public participation, now is your opportunity. Remember, we do not have any public hearings tonight, so if you are here to speak to an agenda item, now is the time. Mayor, I'm not seeing anybody.
No brave souls this evening. Thank you so much, Mitchell. With that, we will close for public participation and move on to agenda item 5, which is proclamations and presentations. Our first presentation, 5.1, is updates from LPEA on renewable energy sources. And we
Mayor
have with us, go ahead, Jose.
Sorry, Dean. Sorry, Mayor. Mayor and Council, we have with us with LPA, Jessica Matlock and Dan Harms that will be doing a presentation on some of their renewable energy sources and their plan moving forward. I think it's a great opportunity for the City Council to take a look at their plans moving forward, some of the interesting and awesome things that they will look to accomplish. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jessica and Dan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jose, and Mayor Dean Berkey and the council. Thanks for having us tonight. We appreciate your time. So we are going to give you an LPA 101, and what that is it gives you a little bit of a snapshot of where we're at today, our carbon content and our future plans. And we talk a little bit, actually Dan will at the end, a little bit about reliability. Obviously that's on everyone's mind, especially what happened in Texas. And so he's going to talk a little bit about that. More information, though, can be found in his op-ed that was published in the Durango Herald on Saturday. So if not all of your questions are answered, please review that op-ed. He did a fantastic job of discussing why many of the issues in Texas will not impact our region. And that's more because of how the physics of the grid are constructed and the flow of electrons across the grid. But also, and really important point, because we get a lot of customers asking us, well, what about if you're going to go 100% renewables? We are not going to 100% renewables. It's not technically feasible to go that route at this point. We still have to have firm energy to keep the lights on. So please, I would just encourage everybody to look at that op-ed for more information. But with that, Dan is actually going to share his screen. And Dan is our Vice President of Grid Solutions at the utility. So he helps manage all of our power supply, which is the electrons that flow through your wires underground and overhead. And so we're going to kind of tag team this. So we'll start off with our first slide, just again, identifying this is our kind of orientation. So who is LPEA? Most of you know this, but for those that don't, we are a member-owned, not-for-profit electric distribution cooperative. We are not a government agency. Some people think that we are. We are not, but we are not-for-profit. And we do serve all of La Plata and Archuleta counties with some segments of Hinsdale, Mineral, and San Juan. We are pretty large in regards to cooperatives, and we are the 5th largest in the state of Colorado. We serve over 34,000 members, and that's obviously increasing dramatically in the Durango area because of all the people that are now moving here, especially after COVID. So we're seeing a lot of additional connections. We do have 3,700 miles of distribution line. That's a lot of area, just to let you know. So I used to come from a utility in the Northwest that was very large, served northward of the Seattle area up to the Canadian border. And our lines of distribution wires was about 2,600. So if you think about it, we're 3,700. And we have 6 crews of linemen who consist of about 4 to 5 linemen on each crew that manage that entire system. So when your lights go out, just think of those crews working 24 hours a day to get the lights on. So they spend a lot of time doing that. and 50% of that is underground. Okay. Just to repeat, we were co-founded in 1939, so we are 81 years old. We are governed by 12-person board, and the next slide will show some of the maps of that. Again, 5th largest in the state, and we sell close to 1 billion kilowatt hours a year. So 95% of our power, as per a contract that was written several years ago, we are required to obtain 95% of that power from Tri-State for the next 30 years. And we are only allowed to generate 5% locally. We've already reached that cap, and that cap is renewable energy. And so if people wonder, why are we asking for a buyout number from Tri-State? We are not asking to buy out of Tri-State, but we are asking for a number to see what the cost is. Delta Montrose, which is the cooperative just north of us, they successfully bought out of Tri-State, and now their savings are in the double-digit $1 million to their members because they are now able to buy their energy from a different source than Tri-State. So it is important that we do examine our future energy supply and see what are the options. And that's where we are currently. Okay. I love this picture because a lot of our linemen go out and do safety meetings. And this is at the St. Columbus School. And we go around a lot of the schools to teach them safety of electrical equipment, especially during storms when there's a wire down. The electricity can actually jump about 30 feet. And so we want to make sure that even your city workers are safe. So this is just kind of a little plug to all of you that we'd love to come talk to your fire departments, police departments, operations departments, just to remind them of the electrical safety. Because obviously a lot of our safety issues in Durango and surrounding areas are carpool accidents. We have a lot of folks that are drunk drivers or distracted hitting carpools. And that is really some of the majority of our outages right now. So when the wire goes down, we just want to make sure that the personnel responding to those events are safe. So that's just kind of a side note. But on our vision, again, we want to build trustworthy community partnerships. We want to be innovative, forward thinking, and delivering excellence to our members. We always have to be thinking forward in energy. It's a constant moving, progressing entity and area of expertise with energy. You would think that you know everything about it, but we're still learning. Okay. Our mission, again, the number one requirement for us in our mission is safe. We want to keep everybody safe and the power reliable. And we want to acquire electricity at the lowest reasonable cost while being environmentally responsible. So again, we want to make sure that whatever power supply we bring to our members, it has to be safe and reliable. There's no question about that. Okay. So one of the goals that the board passed a few years ago was that we will reduce our carbon footprint by 50% from our 2018 levels by the year 2030. But at the same time, we will only do that if we keep our electricity costs lower than over 70% of our Colorado peers. So what that means is that we will look to lower our carbon content by also making sure that whatever we do in order to do that, it's safe and it's reliable, but it also keep our rates low or affordable. So that's an important point. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, you're just going to add a bunch of renewables and increase our costs. That is absolutely opposite of what we're looking at. We're looking at reducing our carbon content and lowering our costs. We would not be adding carbon neutral or carbon free resources and increase our costs. That is against our goal and our mission. Okay. This is just a great diverse leadership team that we have. It's pretty new. I won't go through everyone, but we have a great team. I'm sure many of your communications group has been talking to Hillary Knox. She's our Vice President of Communications. The man in charge to keep all of your lights on is Jerry Sutherland on the lower left. And he's a new Vice President of Operations. He manages all the crews and the air traffic control center that keeps your lights on 24/7. Okay. So again, this is the district map that shows how we're portioned out. The board, again, as I mentioned, is 12 board members, and they're broken up into 3 members per district. So as you can see, Durango has its own district, and it's District 3. And as you can see on the lower left-hand corner, it is that pinkish light red color. Okay, thank you, Dan. And so what's important about that too is that we do have elections every year for 1 member in each district. So there will be another election in the Durango area. It's every year. So it's important that the community pays attention and votes for the candidate that they choose. Okay, now I'm going to hand this over to Dan.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for letting us join you here tonight. Jessica covered a lot of the history and what LPA is here for, and I'm going to take a little deeper dive into cost of power, just our power supply, and then, as she mentioned, hit on reliability towards the end. A lot of people ask, why so much focus on power supply? The reason why is because that's 64% of our expenses, and therefore 64% of what you pay in a power bill when you pay Lpa Electric. So obviously, the more attention that we can pay to that, the greater potential there is for savings. So that's our number one cost driver, which is why we're paying so much attention to that right there. Now, renewables have been an interesting topic of discussion for quite some time now. And it used to be that people's platform was just trying to stay green. You got to pay more, but you're going to be green. Well, that's no longer the case. You can have the best of both worlds, being green and having lower cost. As you can see on this chart here, just a little over 10 years ago, yes, renewables were significantly more expensive than our other forms of generation that we were looking at the time. And so that's why still so much investment was being made in these other forms, because nobody imagined the day that renewables, well, they did imagine the day, it was just much further out. But it crossed the line of these other forms of generation much sooner than anticipated, to the point that now renewables are even less than just what it costs to put the fuel into these other generators, even if they were completely paid off. So definitely something that people are paying attention to now. Now, as Jessica mentioned, we aren't necessarily, and we haven't made up our mind that we are buying out of Tri-State or looking for another power supply. What we do want is the information to make that decision. And that is part of that decision. That's this piece over here, the cost of the buy down. Well, there's 2 other parts that really play into that decision as well. And one of those is the cost of that replacement power. If I have to buy power at the same price I'm buying it at today, then I can't afford to make that buy down payment or buy out like we need to. The other component is transmission expense. We have to get the power here. We want to generate as much locally as we can, but realistically, we're still going to have to bring some power into our area. So all 3 of these components really intertie and play a role in what it's going to take to make that decision. So here's a pie chart that's somewhat representative of our current and what we hope is our power supply mix here in the next 5 years. Right now, as we buy our power from Tri-State, we're buying 95% of that from Tri-State. So here is LPA's 5% slice. All of our power that we generate locally is carbon free. And the remainder is what we purchase from Tri-State. And Tri-State is predominantly coal, but they do have some natural gas and a fairly large portion of renewables at this point. Most of Tri-State's renewables right now come in the form of large-scale hydro from Western Area Power Authority. Now, in the future, what we're hoping to do is expand LPA's piece of pie over here, where we can add more carbon-free resources, whether that be solar or bringing wind in from external places. And of course, we would still be buying a portion from Tri-State. Now, how much flexibility we get and how much we can purchase outside of Tri-State is still yet to be determined. There are some options on the table right now where LPA could buy a portion of their electricity, have it be self-supplied, and then buy the rest from Tri-State. So we're exploring those options. Some decisions on that can be made as early as May of this year. And we're hoping to find out what we're able to do and where we might, what path and trajectory we might be on in the future to meet these 5-year operational goals of reduced carbon. So this is another illustration of the 5% that LPA has control of. What this blue line represents is the load profile of La Plata Electric's, all of our load, all of our residential, all of our commercial and industrial load, all combined over about a 1 week period. So this is, you see your highs and lows coming along every day. This green amount down here at the bottom is actually what we provide, and the gray is what we purchase from Tri-State. Now in the future, we hope to have a different look on all this, where we can maybe have a large 50 megawatt solar array in La Plata County or Archuleta County, between the two areas here somewhere. And then possibly we have a lot of other natural resources in our area that we can use as well, that can be carbon free, and try to use that as base generation. So that might be what this blue square down here at the bottom could represent. But of course, to meet our entire load profile, we have to also buy some from Tri-State, because it'd be maybe a partial exit that we could do. And the orange over here would represent a contract and a service that we might have from a third-party supplier that can provide different resources, and they have a very large mix of resources that they could provide during that time. And the idea behind all this, and this is something else I think that we need to be clear with all of our membership as well, is that when La Plata Electric looks at entering into these kind of agreements, we aren't playing the spot market. You saw how that impacted Texas. Utility bills went through the roof, and that's really not where we're headed. We're looking for fixed price contracts, so we know what those are going to be in the coming years. And so we're hoping to combine several different resources to provide a profile that makes a block of power that we have secured and firm pricing going into the future. So now I'm going to touch on the reliability aspects a little bit. And it's we started talking about this probably 2 weeks or so before all the drama unfolded in Texas and across a large portion of Middle America. And what I think is important to point out here is where this red dashed line sits is below that line. That's La Plata Electric. We definitely have control over a lot of these aspects. You know, weather rolls through, but we can do the best we can to prepare for that. We can trim our trees. We can make sure that nothing is going to fall into the lines. We can replace underground cable that's aging. We can make sure our poles are of superior quality that aren't susceptible to falling over as well. Those are the things that we do every day to ensure that we keep the lights on. Now, 2 weeks ago, I would have said, hey, you never need to worry about the upstream portion of all this. You know, the bulk electric system, that's always there. You don't have to worry about that part of it. Well, we definitely saw how that can turn out in different areas. Now, Jessica mentioned the editorial that we published, and there's some good information in there on why that maybe Colorado isn't quite as susceptible to that. But one of the reasons is you see all the lines that tie all the resources together that go through this drawing here. That means that really any one of these lines could fall down, become inactive because of a short circuit or something. And if any one of these go away, everything is still in power. There are multiple paths for that energy to get out and get around the grid. Now, of course, if you lose multiple generation assets like happened in Texas, that's when you can really have some issues. But the key point of this is when La Plata Electric, if it has to go and purchase power that's not from Tri-State, but possibly somebody else on the electric grid, it's more about the reliability of the grid itself as a whole unit, as opposed to just purchasing from one supplier, because all the suppliers feed into this grid and we pull from the grid. And so the reliability has a little less to do with the particular supplier and more to do with how the grid in that particular area is actually configured. Now, you'll see down in this section over here, we would like to add solar on this side of that line. We'd like to add some green. This is my artistic ability here, making green base load power here, tying that into our area as well. A few options for that we're evaluating. And if we can do some of that, then that also helps to increase the reliability of our system and makes us a little less dependent on this bulk electric system up here. So those are all things that we have in the works, and we would love to take any questions that you might have.
And thank you. Appreciate it. That was totally informative and timely and somewhat reassuring. So thanks so much for that great presentation. Counselors, any questions for Dan or Jessica at this point?
I have a couple.
Excellent, Melissa. Go right ahead.
Jessica, question for you. I know that in the past you have helped the city of Seattle with an electrical renewable, increasing their energy efficiency to get to carbon neutral or 100% renewable electric. And I'm hoping that we might be able to at some point and engage with you on that. Is that something that we might be able to work on together at some point?
Yes, actually, it's a great question. So what we did is it was beneficial electrification, actually. So that's the key word to get to reduce your carbon. But then it's also, it requires us to reduce the carbon on the energy side. So what Dan is saying is that pie chart you saw. Mm-hmm. So we're actively working to reduce the carbon content of the energy that supplies power to all of you. When you talk about energy efficiency, that actually encompasses like electric heat pumps. You may not think that because it's increasing electricity usage, but it's actually considered energy efficiency because you're moving away from the electricity that used to fire up your gas heat or propane. And electric heat pumps are made so energy efficient that you're using a little bit less. So we actually have a lighting rebate program that is on our website, and we actually give rebates for commercial lighting and residential lighting. Now, there's not a lot of work that can be done. Well, there can be actually in energy efficiency, but for us, our focus is more on beneficial electrification because it provides two benefits to our community. One, it helps reduce air pollution, so carbon content in the air. So it helps us meet our carbon goal. But it also assists with, once we get a cleaner energy source on our side, then it helps reduce the carbon content of just your energy supply. So I hope that helps. It's a little bit different from what you said in regards to energy efficiency, like weatherization and those kind of things. But our point is actually hitting more of the main component. So for example, we have a lot of housing out here that uses propane to heat their homes, right? It's very expensive. Actually, if our community would convert from propane to electric heat pumps, those people would reduce their bill dramatically. So, for example, in Seattle, I converted my house from gas to all heat pumps, and my electric bill cut in half. Wow. So we're trying to kind of change somewhat of the discussion to actually lower people's bills. And that was what Dan was saying too, is that if we can lower our power supply costs, then we can look to keep our rates stable for years.
That's great.
And that's essentially a rate reduction, but keeping rates stable. So that's what we're working towards.
I know we're planning on meeting with you regularly, hoping, and I hope that as a council, we get to do that as well. I personally have a lot to learn, and it's a complex topic. And so I hope we get to continue engaging with you. Thank you both, you and Dan.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I'm going to ask one more if no one has any. And
sure.
But this is just a quick one. Your board terms, how long are they? And are there term limits? And is the person in Durango rerunning?
So the board has a 3-year term, and there's no term limits that I know of. Maybe Dan would know. He's been at the company a lot longer. And right now is the open application, so we're still waiting to see. But if people would like to apply, all the information is on our website, but the application opportunity to submit your application to apply is open now. So go to our website.
So there's been a lot of conversation lately, and I'm sure for quite a while, about broadband and what part LPEA might play in broadband supply to our communities, particularly in this time. We've all learned that Zoom has overloaded a lot of our networks, and so it'd be great to have something more dependable. Do you have any thoughts that you might share with us on that?
Yes, we have had a broadband committee formed for the last 2 years, and that consists of 3 of our board members and several staff. So we've been looking at this consistently for over 2 years, actually. And our next meeting is March 9th, and that's open to the public. So if folks are interested, go to our website, click on the committee page. We are redoing our website, so hopefully it's easier to find. If not, go up to the search box and look for broadband. But we are trying to understand what is LPA's role. As you know, we own 75% of Fast Track, and that's a broadband company in town, but they provide the backbone to our communities, not necessarily broadband fiber to the home. And so as a cooperative that our main role should be supplying power, we are trying to determine what is our role, because we do string fiber along our power lines to communicate amongst our operations. And so can we be a part of the solution to help lease fiber to a third party? We are a little bit hamstrung though, because there were these grant awards that were just awarded across the United States, and a different entity won those awards that were not part of our state. And so what that does is it does lock up all of those areas so that we cannot get grants, state or federal grants. But we are investigating with that entity if we can partner with them, or if someone else can partner with them to gain those grants in order to build faster and cheaper broadband. It's something near and dear to Dan and I's heart. We both have children in school and terrible broadband in our community. So trust me, it's near and dear to our heart, and we're working really hard to try to be a part of the solution.
Well, thank you. And just keep us updated. And if there's some way we can participate that's very supportive of that, we'd love to do it.
Thank you.
And Jessica and Dan, I just want to thank you for your presentation and for your work in our community. It's nice to know that you're thinking about upcoming issues so we don't have to worry about it. So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again. Appreciate your time, and hopefully you can we can offer up a good candidate for your board from the city area, District 3, and look forward to that as well. So thanks so much. Appreciate it. And with that, we might move on to item 5.2 in our agenda, which is financial update, preliminary budget, and actual report for December 31st, 2020. Jose, take it away.
Mayor, no problem. Sorry about that, Mayor. Mayor and Council, we have Devin Schmidt, our strategic plan and budget manager. Cynthia did just unexpectedly come down with a stomach bug, so Devin is pinch hitting for her and substituting, but we'll go over the financial update.
Thank you, Jose, and good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. I want to make sure that you are seeing the City of Durango year-to-date 2020 preliminary summary. Is that what you all are seeing on your screen?
Yes, thank you, Devin.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate the confirmation. So as Jose mentioned, I'm the budget and strategic planning manager, pinch hitting for our finance director, Cynthia Sneed. And so I'm going to be taking council through the December 2020 preliminary summary for month close. So I'm going to start off here with the general fund. I'm going to tend to focus in this area of ahead or behind in each one of these fund areas. So starting with our general fund, you can see that the year-to-date actual revenues are about 6% less than the estimated year-to-date budget. I do want to emphasize that these numbers are subject to year-end adjustments and some closure numbers once the 2020 actuals have been audited and presented in the CAFR. So 6% down for revenues, which if we remember, this time last year or in a couple weeks, we were trying to pull together what 2020 was going to look like. And we were originally projecting maybe a 30% decrease. So 6% overall is Really a fantastic situation for the city at this point. And with that, and because of not knowing where the pandemic was going to go, within the general fund, expenditures were also reduced about 12% overall. So as you can see, the anticipated amount that the general fund will be ahead or behind is 2.5 million. We can see over here in this actuals to budget that we're about 2.9 short in those revenues and 5.2 ahead, if you will, in the budget for the expenditures. So looking at what that means for our preliminary fund balance, we are looking at a total of about 14.7. I do want to highlight a few items here. So we do have some restricted items, which include Tabor, that includes inventory. So those are really items that have been restricted via law. And then we have this unassigned fund balance of about 9.2. We did include our encumbrances over here as well, as some of those could either be liquidated or carry forward depending on the nature of the encumbrance. And then our current year results is 3.1. So just kind of looking at what that means in a little bit more granular level in the general fund, we are seeing here a dip in our charges and services, and that's due to rec center closures for COVID. You will see a spike here with the Lpa County sales tax, and we do have a good relationship with the county to try and determine what the differences are there, and hopefully we'll have some resolution this year in that. In the intergovernmental revenues, the CARES Act funding is the increase for the actuals on this line. And then hopping over to our general fund expenditures for year-to-date actuals versus the estimated budget, you can see that Parks and Recreation really had a significant decrease due to those closures. And really everywhere along here, we see a reduction in budget, with the exception of this community support funding. And that has to do with the business relief fund and that CARES Act money that we were able to deploy to businesses to help them get through the COVID pandemic. So before I move on to the enterprise fund, I do want to pause and take a quick second. Any questions from council at this time?
I just had one quick question, Devin. Would it be a correct assumption to make that the unassigned end of the year general fund balance, that 9.2 million, potentially is higher than it might have been because of the deferral of projects?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a fair assumption, because we did not make that $400,000 transfer that we had originally intended into the CIP projects, because those projects were deferred.
Thank you.
Devin, I had a question too. I was just wondering, current year results, where does that number come from, since it isn't the revenue minus the expenses?
Sure. So that number does have a little bit different items in it. So if you subtract out the encumbrances, over here, our expenditures are including those encumbrances in them, not knowing whether at this point what we're going to have to liquidate, as we still have some invoices coming in for year end and that type of nature. We went ahead and included our encumbrances in the expenditures. So that's where you have this difference here between current year results, because you have to minus out your encumbrances, and there's a few adjusting entries in there that make up that difference in that current year versus the head or behind.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions from council before I jump to the enterprise funds? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So in our enterprise funds, we have some similar situations here where the actual to budget for the water fund is about 1% less than what we had budgeted. So nothing too scary there or concerning for council in that regard. Expenses are reduced by 1.5. And again, that has to do with some of those project deferrals as well as just the cost mitigations that we put in place early on due to COVID and not knowing. The fund balance for the water fund is preliminary at 16.3 million with unassigned of 16,183,000 and an encumbrance amount of around 176,236. In the sewer fund, you can see that revenues are about 5% under what we were anticipating for budget, while expenditures are decreased by 2.7 million. So overall, we anticipate that we're ahead in the sewer fund by just over 750,000. For the fund balance, we are anticipating 5.3 million in the sewer fund. So again, unassigned, we have about 5.1 and about just over 154,000 in encumbrances. Moving on to the Transportation Services Fund, you can see the year-to-date actuals, revenues and expenses. We do have some X's here where the expenses did preliminarily exceed the revenues. And actuals to budget here, you can see that we were short in the transportation fund just about 15% of revenues. However, we are still looking at about a 1.9 in the fund balance. So still comfortable with what we have in there. Unassigned is going to be 1.8 million and an encumbrance of about 8,750. In the Sustainable Services Fund, revenues did exceed expenses by just over 561,000. In the actuals to budget, you can see we have green check marks all the way across here, so that's positive. We're anticipating preliminary fund balance of 2.4 million. 2.2, that's unassigned, and 203 is an encumbrance. And then jumping down to the airport fund, again, we have the positive green check marks down here with the ahead or behind. Year-to-date actuals for the airport is 585,000 revenues exceeding expenditures. And you can see that we're in a positive position with the fund balance of about 8.5 for year-end 2020 with 8.3 in unassigned and 190,000 in our encumbrances. And the airport is just about 14% below what we anticipated for budget. So before I move on to our special revenue funds, do I have any questions from council that I can answer?
I was gonna have you just, I was just gonna have you, Devin, if you don't mind, can you explain for those who might be watching potentially why we have such a large water fund balance?
I can certainly try to go down that path. So I think initially the thought process of the fund balance would be to set money aside for capital projects. And so I believe that was the original intent. And, you know, with not knowing what COVID was going to do, we did defer some projects in the water fund. So of course that added that back in there. And I don't know if Jose or if we have Jared or Levi that would like to contribute any more to that, but that's about as much as I can answer. I'd be happy to get some more information from you from Levi and Kevin and Jose.
But I would say, Councilor Joseph, is one of the things that we're looking at doing as part of our financial projects is a more detailed water fund fund balance analysis. Just with the history that I don't have, I can't really answer specifically on where it is. I have heard, though, that has been made that there was a savings for a future possible water treatment plant that was placed aside. So that is some of the history that I've been given, but to have a very definite basis of what that fund balance is and where we're going to do with it is still requiring some time to do some analysis on it.
Thank you. No, I think those are great answers. It's just such a high balance. Sometimes I think it's striking. So I think it's nice to kind of talk to that. And also just would add, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that we will be reviewing the water master plan, and that may provide us some information on needs for a future water treatment plant, correct?
Yes, there are some findings that have some draft findings that have been developed by our consultant, and I am working with staff this week to go over those draft findings, ask the appropriate questions, get a better handle on kind of where we are, and then that will go through the IAB and the city council. So it is coming when we are analyzing it as a staff right now.
Thank you.
Jose, I think if I understood correctly, some conversations that we've all had in the past, that the analysis of the water fund balance would be coming to us sometime in March, if I remember Cynthia's conversation correctly.
Yes, it would be, I think, coming in March. She is kind of doing her 100-day assessments this week. So she does have an updated schedule, and I'm trying to remember precisely where that is, but we'll definitely get that out. But it was situated, originally estimated March. I think it's still there, but there have been some projects that needed to be placed on hold for a couple months. But we will follow back with the council and let you know.
And my question, Jose, was I was thinking that she had told us the second quarter, so I wanted to make certain that sometime, if not March, which is still first quarter, then sometime in second quarter, we will get an analysis of the high fund balance and recommendations about what to do with that. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So Devin, I had another question, and it has to do with the Transportation Services Fund.
Okay.
So if I understand correctly, normally, and we have in the past, in the past couple of years, transferred $350,000 out of the Durango Tourism Fund into the Transportation Services Fund. And we did not do that this year because we didn't have enough money in the Durango Tourism Fund. But one of the conversations that we had prior to Jose's arrival was that one of the reasons why we were able not to be concerned about that $350,000 transfer was because of CARES money that we were receiving into the Transportation Services Fund. So we weren't going to be in this deficit issue. So what happened? I guess is my question there.
Sure. Yeah, no, and that's a really good point, and I'm glad you called that out. I do believe that we have not accepted all of that CARES Act funding that we had allocated, but I can certainly circle back with Amber Blake and Sarah Hill to get a definitive answer for you on that.
That would be great, because that's really concerning. We have challenges with the Transportation Services Fund not funding itself well. Anyway, I had a conversation about a month ago, I believe, when we were discussing the lodger's tax, and this negative number did not feature in that conversation. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I will circle back and make sure too. And that's really why we wanted to say preliminary. And in some cases with those grant funds, because we request them at the end of the quarter, they can take some time to land back into our account and reflect as an actual. You know, I know in future years, the plan will be to reflect those on more of an accrual and say, yeah, we're expecting this, so that your reporting is much more accurate, but we're just not there yet.
Yeah, and that's a pretty standard matching revenues to expenses concept, so that you don't end up chasing itself. So thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any other questions from council before I move on to the special revenue funds? Okay. All right, so looking at our special revenue funds, I'm going to continue to focus on the check marks where we have here. I do want to highlight and call out and just kind of start this conversation with, there are some areas within the 2015 and the 2019 where the interfund transfers back into that capital projects fund have not been completed yet. And this goes back to what we just talked about on the accrual. The reason those have not been completed is due to the need to break out the capital projects fund. If council recalls, we did that in 2021. So to go and put anything in there besides actuals at the end of 2020 would not make sense. So we have held on that, and that will be a year-end adjustment. So I did want to highlight here where you may say there's no expenditures in this 2015 sales tax. There are expenditures, and once we make those adjustments, we can certainly revise and repost these reports. So starting with that, overall, each one of these sales tax funds, the special revenue funds, were about 3% down. And so the makeup of that revenue includes sales tax, use tax. And so once again, really positive. We were very concerned in thinking that was going to be that 30% decrease, but really have rebounded this year. So as far as fund balances, in the 2015 sales tax fund, we're sitting at about 184,189. In the 2005 sales tax fund, we're sitting at 2.9 million. In the 2005 debt service, we're sitting at the 5,218. And in this debt service, that is where we have the ability to transfer out from the road impact fee fund, which we did receive about $20,000 year to date in the actual revenue. So we did have a bit of an increase there, and that was our plan to make sure we're able to cover our debt service. In the 2019 sales tax fund, we have 1.4 million in expenditures, or in that fund balance. And then in the Durango Tourism Fund, which is the fund Mayor Pro Tem Baxter just brought up, where we are short our revenues to expenditures, we are behind 115,819, and we have a fund balance of 3,939. So before I jump to internal services, are there any questions from council?
Sure. I'll ask another one. So if the 2005 quarter cent taxes, the post and also the debt service are both quarter cent, how can their revenues be different?
I can get back to you on that one. In the 05, since that is an isolated fund, there could be grants receivables in there, but that number is lower. So let me get back to you on that one, if that's okay.
Sure, that would be great. And then the other thing is how you were so accurate, or somebody was so accurate, the revenues both and expenses both, well, the revenues are actual and budget are exactly the same. That when all the others were not so accurate, I would be wondering what's going on with that.
In the debt service one specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a pretty regimented, we pay the same amount each month, and I think it's...
Yeah, I can understand why the expenses would be perfect because it's a debt service and you know what it is. I don't get why the revenues would be so spot on and be different than the other quarter cent sales tax.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. We can certainly take a look at that and send that back out to council and make sure that we post that with the public as well.
Thank you.
No problem.
Now, I'll jump in. On the 2019, I think that you mentioned this earlier, Devin, I don't think it reflects the recent approval from council to do some more work on areas. I think that might have been another 900,000 or so. But the point I guess I want to make certain that we're aware of is the reserve fund balances are all over the map, from less than $4,000 to a balance of 2.9 million. And so I think there, again, we've asked the strategy and long-term finance and for also council to think about what's the ideal fund balances. And I recognize they need to be different for the purpose, but this is varying widely. And I'll put it out to Devin or Jose for any comment on that.
Either way, Jose, sorry.
You can go ahead first. I'll follow
Okay.
back.
I was just going to say, as we work on the forecasting for each one of our funds, that is the plan for us to take a look at each fund and try and untangle some of those items. We met last night with strategy and long-term finance and discussed the general fund balance, and are following best practices and looking to bring another recommendation and actual policy to council. So I would anticipate that we would do similar processes with each fund. And if I didn't cover all of that, Jose, please feel free to jump in.
So I also had another question on the Durango Tourism Fund. If you, sorry, Jose, did you have something you wanted to say about?
Oh, just saying that was a good explanation that Devin gave.
So I'm not quite certain why the expenses were higher than the budget, because I thought that was a contract amount that we were paying to, at this point, to visit Durango. So I'd be interested in knowing what happened there.
Okay. Yes, I can certainly get that. That is a contract with Visit Durango. I do need to confirm if any of those other transfers occurred, the $25,000 admin fee or any of those other interfund transfers that come back into the general fund. I can certainly confirm if any of those are in that makeup.
Right, and it would seem we would have budgeted for that, so that's why I'm asking. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Devin, is any more to your, oh yeah, as there usually is. Sorry to cut you short.
No, that's okay. This one's we can take this one pretty quickly. This is our internal services funds. And so just jumping off right away with the general services fund, we can see revenues to expenditures. That's not unusual for us to have more expenses than revenues because we have fund balance in here. These are internal service funds and they function to really support other city services. Moving on then to the SURF fund, we can see that our revenue to expenditures, all green check marks across here. We do have that 5.3 of the fund balance. I do know that this is in finance's wheelhouse to also look at this and determine what makes sense for a SURF fund. Should we have this much in here? Is it too much? And again, follow that same fund balance analysis. For the self-insurance fund, you can see that we have our green check marks across the base here. We do have an estimated fund balance of just under $1 million, and that fund can be a little bit trickier to budget for simply because you can't anticipate the amount of claims we'll see in a year for our self-insurance. And then jumping over to our risk manager fund, we have the check marks across the way, and then we have the budgetary fund basis of just under 400,000. So any questions, comments, or anything I can answer for council on the internal service?
Not on this, but on the whole presentation. Thank you, Devin. This is, we are making continuous improvements in our reporting, and I think this kind of information in this kind of a format helps us make better decisions. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate it.
No problem.
And tell Cynthia that we hope she gets better soon, and thank you, Devin.
I will. Thank you.
All righty. Well, I just might add that for folks listening in, it's been a heck of a year. Obviously, with the pandemic, we launched early. Our alarm system went off, and we curtailed a number of the expenditures that were planned for this last year, and anticipating a much higher impact in our sales tax revenues and all operations. For us to come out of this with being 6% down on our total revenue and countered with reduction of expenditures that counterbalanced that and ended up actually in a more positive situation for the year that we've just had is a pretty admirable effort by our finance folks and some of the early cautions. We might have been too cautionary as a council entering into the pandemic, but I think we are certainly happy to report these findings at this point that we were not impacted any further than this illustrates. Certainly we fared better than many other communities throughout the state of Colorado. So with that, move on to our next item, and thank you again, Devin. Yeah, appreciate your time and helping out this evening. And it's item 5.3, which is a proclamation for Women's History Month. So I will have a quick sip. And before I start reading this proclamation, and I'm very proud actually to be reading this proclamation for Women's History Month. So whereas women of every race, class, age, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our community in countless recorded and unrecorded ways, and whereas women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of life in our community, and whereas women have made meaningful contributions to the city of Durango through their work as elected officials, on boards and commissions, in local government, and as business and community leaders, and whereas women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other major progressive social movements. And whereas, despite these contributions, the role of women in history has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in literature, education, and culture. And whereas this month, we can celebrate countless pioneering women and their victories as we continue our work to build a society where women can reach their full potential, unobstructed by gender. And whereas the City Council and staff of the City of Durango are dedicated to advancing initiatives to institute diversity, equity, and inclusion, and are committed to ensuring all residents have equitable opportunities to lead peaceful, productive, and safe lives. Now, therefore, I, Dean Berkey, Mayor of Durango, Colorado, do hereby proclaim March 2021 as Women's History Month. And with that, I might ask, do we have a recipient of this proclamation this evening?
Yes,
If not, okay, great.
we have Spencer, as well as I believe Sandy and Imogen representing our core team that are here to accept.
And I might want to thank the author of this proclamation for making a very inclusionary and wonderful proclamation. So thank you for that. And with that, a few words from our staff.
Thank you all very much. I am Spencer Snar, a librarian at the Durango Public Library, and I'm also a member of the core team. As Jose said, this proclamation was brought forward by the core team as a part of our ongoing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And I would like to thank you, Mayor Brookie, and the City Council for recognizing Women's History Month. I also want to encourage all of Durango's citizens to fortify this proclamation and future proclamations with positive and tangible actions. I've prepared 4 easy ways to actively honor women anytime. Number 1, invest in education. Dig deeper and explore the hard history of women's rights. Number 2, spread awareness of the issues women still face today, like the missing and murdered Indigenous women's movement or the ongoing fight to end discrimination against transgendered girls and women. Number 3, support local organizations that champion women's causes, like Durango Sexual Assault Services Organization or the Durango Women's Resource Center. And finally, I invite all of you to join me virtually on Thursday, March 18th at 5 p.m. for the library screening of Coded Bias, a documentary produced by female director Shalini Kataya. In Coded Bias, Kataya and other women investigate how artificial intelligence software has the potential to be as sexist and as racist as the humans who code it. I hope you join me in taking action to uplift and celebrate women this month and all year round. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spencer. Other notations or another no? Sandy and Imogen, thanks so much. You're welcome to say something, but if not, I really appreciate your efforts, and thanks for the core team for putting this together and making this acknowledgement. With that, thank you so much, and we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to include items that are routine or non-controversial in nature and be acted on as in a single motion of City Council. Any item on the consent agenda may be removed by at the request of any councillor and considered for consideration separately. So with that, I would first ask for a reading of the consent agenda, and then if any councillors would like to have any item removed, we will ask for that later.
Good evening, council tonight.
Go ahead, Amy, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go right ahead, I'm sorry.
Consent agenda consists of 8 items. Items 6.1 through 6.3 are approval of minutes. 6.1, the regular meeting of February 2nd, 2021. 6.2, the study session of January 26th, 2021. 6.3, the study session of February 9th, 2021. Item 6.4 is discussion and possible action regarding amending and adding to the personnel regulations to meet Colorado Healthy Families and Workplace Act requirements. Items 6.5 through 6.8 are requests for public hearings with a proposed date of March 16th, 2021. 6.5 is to consider the Rosemary Lane Preliminary Development Plan, 157 Rosemary Lane. 6.6 is to consider the right-of-way abandonment, 170 West 29th Street. 6.6 is to consider, 6.7 is to consider the adoption of the Midtown Urban Renewal Plan, and 6.8 is to consider the Cummings Addition Annexation Initial Zoning and Conceptual Development Plan.
Very good, thank you so much. And with that, I'd ask any councilors if they would like to have any item on the consent agenda removed. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion regarding approval of the consent agenda as written.
So moved. I'll
Been
second.
moved, I believe, by Councillor Baxter and seconded by Melissa Youssef. With that, may we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Councillor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes, thank you so much. We'll move on to public hearings. We have no legislative or public policy related hearings this evening, nor any quasi judicial hearings. So we move to the city attorney's agenda, which 10.1, there are no items brought to us this evening by the city attorney. So we move on to agenda item 11, which is introduction of ordinances. Our first ordinance this evening is an ordinance approving the annexation and initial zoning for the 26918 South Highway 160 addition to the city of Durango and declaring an effective date. May we have a presentation on this ordinance?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this will be ordinance number 2021-4. You may recall that this item was actually continued last meeting so that staff and the owner could finish up some details. This is an annexation near Farmington Hill. And the hearing was conducted 2 meetings ago now. So this ordinance is ready for adoption tonight, the annexes property.
Excellent. Is there any questions of city attorney from members of council? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion on this item. And again, that was
I'll move to approve ordinance 2021-4.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes, thank you so much. With that, we'll move to agenda item 11.2, which is an ordinance authorizing the transfer of city-owned land to the Colorado Department of Transportation for purposes of roadway intersection and pedestrian improvements at 1235 Camino del Rio and declaring an effective date. Again, I'll ask City Attorney to make a short presentation.
Yeah, it'll be brief. This is ordinance 2021-5. This was subject to a public hearing at the last council meeting. This is to transfer about 900 square feet of property at the intersection of Camino del Rio and the property commonly known as River City Hall for roadway intersection and pedestrian improvements. This also includes a temporary construction easement for that construction. So this ordinance is ready for approval on first reading.
Excellent. Thank you, Dirk. Councilors, any questions for City Attorney? Well, you guys Dirk's getting off easy tonight. So I think we have, as was mentioned, a significant public hearing on this. And so if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve ordinance 2021-5.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes. Thank you so much. We're now moving right along to item 12 of the agenda, which is administrative. First item 12.1 is the final approval of ordinance 2021-3, amending Article 4 of Chapter 23 of the Code of Ordinances regarding the imposition, collection, and administration of the lodger's tax and declaring an effective date. Jose, City Manager Madrigal, can you give us an explanation of this particular item?
I believe I'm going to kick it to Dirk on the lodger's tax item on this.
Oh, that's a good call. Good call.
This is set tonight for second reading of the ordinance that sort of supports the resolution that set the ballot question for the lodger's tax. I don't really have anything to add. There've been no changes in this. So again, this was agendized for the routine second reading of this ordinance.
Excellent. Thank you, Dirk. And with that, is there any other questions council may have of the city attorney? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for approval, final approval of this ordinance.
And this would be number, this is 2021-3.
Anybody brave enough to make a motion? On
Sorry,
ordinance?
make a motion to approve. Did you say it's ordinance number?
None,
3.
I'd entertain a motion for.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Not sure what happened. Yeah, this is 2021-3.
It was on the background in my other computer. I'll make the motion to approve ordinance. So moved 2021-3. Is that correct? Thank you for confirming.
It's been moved. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Excellent. Thanks for getting through that. Yeah, hearing the mayor twice in echoing is that's more than anybody can tolerate, probably. But
I was totally confused.
No, you're fine. We're moving right along. It's been moved and seconded. Maybe we have a roll call, please.
We have some discussion just for a moment, Mayor.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would just like to say, I understand the importance of tourism in this community. But my concern has always been that 69% of the revenue that will be generated from this is used for marketing and arts and culture. And I'm deeply concerned that we're not taking care of basic necessities such as transportation, workforce housing, and other items. So I just wanted to make clear that those are my concerns with this ordinance.
And I would like to mention that the variability in what we can, what the ordinance says we can spend it on actually gives us quite a bit of flexibility in this. Not only is a portion of it allocated toward transportation, but another portion is essentially at the discretion of council and can also be allocated toward transportation or any of those other things that we might want to do to offset impacts of tourism. So I like the flexibility, and I think that that's a positive thing here.
Thanks for adding that. And I just wanted to also clarify too, like you were saying, Mayor Pro Tem Baxter, that we can use that flexible portion. Plus we are with this in doing, I'm very thankful that we're at least meeting the needs of our transportation current routes. That's very, very important to me. And without that assistance, I think it's going to be extremely difficult. I recognize the difficulty in balancing these percentages. I understand that for many people, they are not completely ideal. And I hear that. I think that what we arrived at as a council majority approval was that we were hearing consensus from all the stakeholders that these percentages worked. And so I think that's where we kind of landed for the majority of us, though it's difficult, I understand. So I do think that this has an important impact on our community, though, over the long term, for adding to our transportation budget, adding to arts and culture, a cultural fund, which I think is an important diversification tool for our community, and for the marketing, sustainable marketing point of it, to really try to utilize those funds to attract off-season marketing to moderate the fluctuations in our seasonality. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I too am very comfortable with this, with the percentages as a consensus of a number of groups within our community, both serving the tourism community as well as those entities that are satisfying the impacts of tourism and creating, in my mind, what I get out of it is the creative support of the creative economy, which is not only supports tourism, but also supports the lifestyle that we as locals like to have in our community. And why not tap some of this money to be used for that? So to have more events, more fun things going on in our community and support the lifestyle that we like in our community. So I'm very comfortable with this bill and or with this resolution, and look forward to having the support of our voters. With that, as it goes on the ballot soon. So with that, may we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy?
No.
And Mayor Brookie?
Yes. Motion passes. We'll move on to
Dean, could I
12 point.
Though?
Sure, but Kim.
Sure. I don't mean to be picky here, but we shouldn't be advocating for the support of our voters.
Correct. Yeah, Paul, I was just, my intent there was to suggest that it was going to be on the ballot and that it would be our action this evening was not, did not make this fact or it was now placed on the ballot for the voters to approve or not approve moving forward. And so thank you for that clarification and appreciate it very much. So we'll all have an opportunity to see this on the April 7th ballot for the election this spring. And that's where it will be decided ultimately. Item 12.2, discussion and possible action concerning adoption of the strategic plan for the city of Durango. And I believe City Manager Madrigal has something to present to us on this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. It is my pleasure to have Devin Schmidt, our Strategic Planning Manager and Budget Manager, present the strategic plan that we have been able to work on over these past couple months. A lot of work within the mission and the values and the vision statement, and then also kind of going through the goals and kind of codifying it and bringing it together. What I would like to do is a little bit of changing gears in regards to the perception or what we're looking for the outcome of this presentation is that Devin will kind of go over it for the public and the council, kind of show what we've been able to put together, understanding that we did try to get this approved on March for today, but I think it was a little bit more of a stretch goal. And what we'd like to do is just kind of give an overview, let people know kind of what the strategic plan looks like in a draft form. Give the council a week to take a look at it, submit in some comments, any things that they would see or have questions about, and then the staff would then take it back in the following week and look at making some changes and then present a final one on the 16th for approval. So I'll give it to Devin to do a presentation of the strategic plan. And then if the council would submit their feedback, or if they have questions, by all means, feel free to do it tonight. But if it's a document, it's got a lot on it. If you want to take until Friday or even to first of day Monday to kind of gather your thoughts and present some items, just feel free to email that to myself, and we will get together as staff and make some of those changes or adjustments that may need to be happening. But on behalf of myself to the City Council, I just want to thank you for the time and dedication that each of you put into this. It was not something that we finished in 15, 20 minutes. It was a lot of hours, a lot of time placing this together, and a lot of thoughtful consideration. So just really want to appreciate the work that you placed into it. And then also a big shout out to our staff. This was a stretch for them as well, looking at this and challenging themselves and putting a strategic plan together. So just really want to tell all of them I greatly appreciate their quick turnaround of placing this together. And then also Devin, a big shout out to her as well for putting this in this format and kind of having a vision for it. So with that, I'll kick it to Devin to do the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Jose, and good evening again, Mayor and members of City Council. It is with great pleasure that we share with you tonight the 2021 strategic plan for the city of Durango. So the strategic plan, as Jose has mentioned, has been a really extensive journey and a process to get to this point in development. It's included input from community partners, boards and commissions, and of course reflects City Council goals, as well as staff input. And so it's been a really excellent process so far. Just wanted to touch for the public to know that the strategic plan is really an outline for short and midterm objectives. It influences the city's budgeting process and guides the implementation of the city's full range of services to help set priorities and organizational strategy, to motivate energy and resources, to strengthen operations, and ensure the team is working towards a common goal. So I'm going to move on then from our cover page here of the strategic plan, which includes our City Council and our executive team leaders. So jumping onto the executive summary. So when you think about mission and vision and value statements, they're really powerful tools for local governments and organizations. They're designed and implemented to effectively inspire and motivate employees, as well as set an organizational culture. So City Council developed our mission as why we exist. So the City of Durango and our employees provide efficient city services, effectively maintain city assets, and manage growth, are accountable, ethical, and fiscally responsible, and collaborate with regional partners to improve the quality of life for our entire community. For our vision, what we aspire to be, Durango is an authentic, diverse, multi-generational, and thriving community. Our residents value and enjoy our unique natural environment and benefit from the management of our city resources in a fiscally responsible environment and socially sustainable manner. And what we believe in, our values: teamwork, dependability, professionalism, service, respect, innovation, and well-being. The summary of objectives. So when we were working through the strategic plan and council's goals, we broke it into different categories of the strategic plan. So the first category we have is diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental and social sustainability, financial excellence and transparency, enhanced livability and sense of place, affordability and economic opportunity, an effective infrastructure network. In our first category of diversity, equity, inclusion, there are some bigger categories. And so I'll touch on those since we have a lot of content and information in here. And this is really a first blush, as Jose mentioned, out to council and the public. So under diversity, equity, and inclusion, our first grouping there that we have is foster a strong partnership with community groups. The second area we have is improve external communication for inclusivity. Internal to the city organization and workforce. So this is specific to the inner workings of the actual city of Durango and its staff. How do we move forward with diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I can pause on each one of these if council wants to make any comments, or we can carry those to the end. I'm amicable to either.
Maybe that's a good idea to just go as we get, because if we are going to do it that way, do we have council support for that before I say something?
Yeah, I think this is primarily a presentation to the public, so I think we certainly, if we can hold and make comments at the end, that might be
okay.
More cohesive.
All right. No problem, Mayor.
Okay, then I will jump to environmental and social sustainability. So again, we have some big targeted areas under this portion of the strategic plan. So we have reduce the city's carbon footprint, increase availability of renewable energy, improve quality of natural resources, and social sustainability. Jumping to financial excellence and transparency, we have several categories under this part of the strategic plan as well. Following up under sustainability, transparency and public trust, accountability, and standards for sound, effective, trained governance. Moving on to affordability and economic opportunity. The big categories we have under this is create housing to enhance multi-generational community workforce, as well as attainable and affordable housing, expand economic development opportunities with regional stakeholders, provide job opportunities for the community, and address homelessness for the community. And for our enhanced livability and sense of place, we have safety, police, fire, emergency services, improve financial viability of amenities, including the Durango Public Library, Parks and Recreation, and work of the Creative Economy Commission. And for our final portion of that part of the enhanced livability and sense of place is identify an iconic feature, so a physical structure activity that becomes a symbol of Durango's physical structure or art center. And finally, our last category, but certainly not least and not last for any reason, we have ensure effective infrastructure network, which our first category under this is mobility, accessibility, transit, and transportation system. Our second category is sanitation, water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste and recycling. Aviation, and then finally we have asset management and facility needs. And before we move to comments, I did want to point out that we did categorize each department or area where they will be working within the strategic plan, or where there is goals or action items underneath that. So this will also tie back, of course, to the budget. and it'll be priority based on the strategic plan. So at this time, I can entertain any comments or questions from council.
Thank you, Devin. Yeah, so with hopefully council is writing down any questions they had for Devin, and so let's go backtrack a little bit and see if there's any questions that she can clarify for council as well as the public.
So just to confirm here, we're just kind of making comments, just quick notes. We're not diving into details, correct? Jose, sorry to make
That's correct. Yes, ma'am. If
Because
there's
we're
like,
doing that in future study sessions together, correct?
we will continue to always look at the strategic plan. It will always continue to move with us. It's not something that stays static, but it's also not something that's perfect. So there'll never be a perfect strategic plan, specifically on our first one. What we're looking at doing is kind of getting that starting off point, continuing to work together throughout the year, adjusting it every year as necessary as the council sees, and continuing to move forward. But there will be discussions with the strategic plan that we'd like to do regularly. It's always something to continue to check back with. Study sessions, I think, would be a perfect venue to continue to bring this up and see kind of where we're at, and begin to discuss a little bit more if there is something that may need to be changed or modified or tweaked.
I interpreted Councilor Youssef's comment to ask if at what point would we be adopting the plan. So what was our procedure for this? Because I think that if we're going to have input into it tonight, that's a different question than having input into it at a study session and then adopting it at the next meeting. So that's what I would be interested in knowing, is what's the procedure for what we're doing.
Okay, so absolutely. The plan would be, how I see it, is that give the council a week now that they've had it to document, write down, send to staff any questions, comments, modifications that they might see or propose. Let staff then have it for the next week, and we'll go over it, begin working through those, and then have a final draft to present or to approve on the 16th of March.
Is there time in our next study session to add some conversation in here? Because I think that just making a recommendation, like, I mean, you saw mine today. I had some recommendations about how we present our goals so that they don't seem hierarchical or prioritized. But I think council should make that decision and
Absolutely.
have that conversation. So do you think we have time in our study session next week to do that?
We could make time if you want to talk about the hierarchical presentation. I mean, that's something that I think is
not just that, it's everybody's comments.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I think that comments like that are things that if we're like big ones that you think that would be placed on would be great. What I think we could end up going all night is if we start getting into more of the objectives and targets. We could be here for a long time, but I think if there's some thoughts and consideration to talk about goals and how they're presented, or maybe some goals that maybe we just missed, I think those are really good topics to have here to discuss. So if there's anything that you see we're off the mark, or that is a big change, I think those are some of the things that we probably should talk about now.
And can I jump in? Both Councilor Youssef and Councilor Baxter's questions help, and it fits my framework. First of all, though, let me give a huge thank you to Jose and Devin and the entire team. This is a big effort, and so I recognize the work that went into it. I, for one, would like to just be able to sit with it, send my comments and share them with all of council, and if time allows on Tuesday, or we can make time on next week, Tuesday, to discuss it. But I just want to recognize that it's great to have some outcomes, expected outcomes, some targets, and some accountability, measurable milestones in the document. So a huge thank you to you guys for the work.
Appreciate that.
So, Jose, yeah, I was just going to say, Jose, thanks for that clarification on anticipated action. Certainly none this evening, but I would also think if we had 15 minutes or so added to our study session to kind of wrap up loose ends, if any, on this, and like you say, after everybody's had a week to live with it, see if there's any significant concerns or adds, and then anticipate you would like to have action on that in approximately 2 weeks.
That's the goal. And, if
Yeah.
we don't get to it, that's okay. Just kind of my plan of action of looking at it on the 16th. I think that we're pretty close for our first one to go through. Was always telling our directors, like, it won't be perfect the first one. It's always kind of that first time of how do we get through this? How do we go? And then as we start to see how it develops and how we interact with the council with it, we'll then be able to really fine tune it even more. But that's the plan right now.
And as you mentioned earlier, it's more of a dynamic document as well. So it's not anything by adoption. It's nothing that is that specific, that doesn't allow for accommodation of new events, new priorities, and certainly tweaking by city council as the year progresses. So it's really just a matter of in our adoption, just the fact that we now have a strategic plan and are reacting in that manner. So you might be able to coach us a little more next week as to what the purpose and what adoption really is intended to be.
And if I could add, I just wanted to add that welcome feedback from the public. If you write to all of council, that's helpful. But in the next coming days, if you see something, it'd be great to hear from members of our community.
And if I could just
Melissa?
add, sorry, is this a good time? I just wanted to add just a couple points then. I would welcome the opportunity to review this in more detail in a study session. I do think that's a really appropriate avenue for that. I do have some ads I'd like to add, and I wanted to just kind of reiterate a couple things. First of all, I could not agree more with what Devin said about the mission and vision, just high level, how important that is and how we crafted that together as a council team. I thought that was really good work. I enjoyed doing that. For me, it's very helpful as I think through things, really everything we do, to be thinking about that. I really like that. And the values, I really was very intrigued by the values. Are they new? Are all of those new values that we've identified, Jose and Devin?
No, ma'am. Those were values that I think that the organization developed in, was it 2018, Devin?
So they've been consistent throughout, but it's just this whole effort of focus on service that I'm really feeling throughout the organization. And I saw it in some of the goals and the responsiveness to emails, under communications. And I just really appreciate that. Couple other things I just want to say that I really liked for people's review. I was very happy to see the library goals back in there and touching on reviewing the possibility of getting it open by Sunday by 2023. I was very happy to also see us, especially with the news we got today about the airport. And congratulations to Tony Vaccari, if he's still on the line listening. But what great news that we have Delta joining our fleet. And it makes me very happy to see that we will be reviewing the terminal plan on the airport and the implementation of the master plan over time. So, and looking at funding strategies. So there were just some things I was very happy to see, in addition to all of the high priority items around housing and homelessness and economic development and safety and diversity, equity, inclusion. I just think you guys did a really good job of laying these out, separating them, and yet incorporating everything at the same time. Very thoughtful approach, and I really appreciate it. I'm just so excited to have this working document. I do know that it will be fluid. I have the feeling I'm going to be like, it will be with me at every meeting. It's a great document, and I'm just probably overly excited about it, but it's such a great work plan that it's exciting. So I wanted to thank you guys.
Appreciate that. Thank you so very much.
I think the strategic plan was a great idea. Jose, that you brought this to us and drove it since you've been here such a short period of time and we've moved this far along. And I really think that it has great potential for aligning the entire organization and having us all pulling in the same direction and having everyone working together rather than in their own departments or their own areas and not having that big picture look. I think the city will, and our community members in particular, will benefit by that. So I want to say thank you to you and your team for making it happen.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, Jose, having clarified the fact that no action is really intended to occur this evening on that item, if there's no further questions of Devin, we might move on to the next topic if it's unless there's any wrap-up items that, yeah.
Just one wrap-up just to make sure. I think we have consensus, but I want to make sure to put this on the study session next week. Head nod, head nod, head nod. Is that good, Mayor?
Yes.
All right, that's all I need.
Yeah, good discussion. Thank you, councilors, and thanks again, Devin and Jose, for bringing this to us. And with that, we move on to item 12.3, discussion and possible action concerning finalization of an affordable/attainable housing agreement with Twin Buttes of Durango. Jose, can you introduce the discussion? Or
yes, sir. Absolutely, Mayor. We have Kevin Hall with our staff to come make a presentation in regards to the Twin Buttes development agreement, and I'll pass it off to Kevin.
Thanks, you, Kevin. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. In your agenda packet, you have a bit of an overview of the history on the Twin Buttes project relative to affordable attainable commitments that they made some years ago as part of their annexation negotiation and agreement. That was memorialized in the development agreement, which has seen some amendments over the years, most recently in 2018. But what has been consistent from the early stages of the development was Twin Buttes' willingness to provide some level of commitment to affordable attainable housing. Their project got its conceptual approval prior to our affordable attainable fair share ordinance that was adopted back in 2009. However, they knew that the city's program was moving forward in this regard. They agreed to meet the 16% commitment, but what we didn't have is a lot in the way of details as to how that commitment, that obligation would be met. And our fair share program does provide for a range of alternatives to meet commitments. That provides kind of the guidance necessary to provide alternatives for Twin Buttes. We've talked with them over the years about a variety of alternatives. The alternatives ranged from building units, fees in lieu, similar to how our fair share ordinance can work and works today, as well as other commitments. In this case, they had a land parcel that they were interested in also providing. So earlier in 2020, there was an ask from Twin Buttes to move forward a proposal that they thought was consistent with others in the community who are doing obligations for affordable attainable. And as you know, we talked a month or so back about our fair share program, the need to revisit the ordinance and the procedures manual, because really what we have fallen back into a primarily a fee in lieu program, as opposed to seeing units get built. We do have a few exceptions to that. However, in 17, you might recall, some of you might recall, the city council worked with Three Springs on a modification to their program, because at the time they were building units and trying to market them at the price point to income qualified buyers, and they weren't finding buyers for essentially a deed restricted unit. The folks were, because of the price points at that time, the program wasn't working well in Three Springs. So the folks who were in that qualified income bracket were able to figure out a way to buy a market rate unit. And I don't think that's the case today. And it certainly wouldn't be in Twin Buttes today. However, we did modify the program in Three Springs to allow for their transfer fee to fund essentially a fee in lieu to cover their commitment on affordable attainable. Certainly that was not lost on the Twin Buttes development. And when we did the changes with Three Springs, there was a significant discussion about equity amongst developments. And with Three Springs, they were at a 25% commitment from earlier in their development. And they asked to be brought in alignment with others that were at 16%. The council agreed to do that. So essentially they went to 16%, paying fees in lieu over the life of the development agreement through their transfer fee to pay their commitment. It's a little bit difficult to quantify the actual value when you do it this way, because the way the calculation works on fees in lieu is really based on, again, the fair share program. And every year Homes Fund revises the value associated with a 1, 2, and 3 bedroom unit. So those numbers change every year. So it's a little bit difficult to say, today you owe us X. And then if you consider the present value of dollars and you start discounting, it gets a little more tricky as well. We did manage to work through that with Three Springs. Twin Buttes has come forward now with a proposal that is similar in nature to what Three Springs did. One of the things I'd like to call out, though, is as part of the original annexation negotiation and agreement, and ultimately landing in the development agreement, which is really the legal document associated with what is required of the developer, and I called this out in the staff report, is the transfer fee at Twin Buttes is a little bit different. The transfer fee at Twin Buttes is a transfer fee in perpetuity, and I included that in your agenda pack because I think it's important to differentiate from, let's say, Three Springs, where their transfer fee really was related to meeting their affordable attainable commitments and some things for the Metro District. In this case, as you see in the language in the transfer fee, it was generalized as to how the city could use those dollars, specifically generalized, and it was really left to the city council. Now, having said that, I went through 10 years of documentation in preparation for this meeting, and I think there was always an intent for these dollars to be used for affordable attainable purposes. I think it's always been staff's understanding that was going to be the purpose of these dollars. I think we've represented it that way to council, but we never really memorialized it beyond what's in the development agreement and what's in that transfer fee covenant. So one of the things we were asking for tonight was and it's certainly a policy decision on council as to whether you want to lock down the transfer fee dollars towards affordable attainable, and or as pointed out in the transfer fee covenant itself, it could be other things as well. But I do believe, based on a variety of minutes from planning commissions, even council staff comments, and then certainly Twin Buttes themselves brought forward a fairly thorough accounting of intent on use of these dollars for affordable attainable purposes. So staff has always felt that that's the likely and intended purpose of these dollars. However, no council prior to this one has ever locked that down. So we kind of have these dollars sitting in an account. They're building, and they're only building slowly because really the houses have just started coming online. And I think what we're going to see is a bit of a bell curve with the transfer fee over time, because right now there's not a lot of units. They're also not rotating to new owners, but they are selling lots and units out there. So the dollars are building. At some point in time, once the neighborhood establishes, I would expect it to flatten out a little bit, but I think there's still going to be, I think I've heard averages about every 7 years a house rotates to a new owner, and that might vary a little bit, but as this stock builds in Twin Buttes, those dollars will start increasing. And you saw Twin Buttes provided their own analysis of what they thought the transfer fee could generate over just a fixed period of time. And it was 33 years. They figured it was anywhere from 16.5 million to $26 million. A fee in perpetuity is something else. And, we don't know what the end on this is, but what Twin Buttes is asking is that these fees are used to offset their affordable attainable commitment. And I think that fits within the parameters of intent as well as what's in the development agreement. It certainly can do that. But again, that is also somewhat of a policy decision as to whether council wants to take that approach. The one thing I think is really important to differentiate, though, there's some fixed dollar value of the 16% commitment that is less than what is going to come in through the transfer fee. That's understood by the Twin Buttes team. They know that the perpetual fee is going to far exceed their commitment. A question I would pose is whether you'd want to account for if there's an approach taken where the transfer fees does fee in lieu to pay down their commitment, whether we want to essentially every year track until we get to what is essentially 105 units of affordable attainable or their equivalency in terms of dollar value. And what that would allow to happen is if we said yes to that, then you would know what there would be an end date in which their commitment is met. And then you would say, okay, your affordable attainable commitment is met. Now these dollars could be used for other purposes that are consistent with the transfer fee and the development agreement. Or the council could just say, we want these dollars to permanently go to affordable and attainable. And those are somewhat two different decisions. And I think it is for council to make that decision as to how you want to proceed on that. I did see comments from Councilor Baxter just shy of the meeting this evening. So I tried to give that a quick read, Kim, and I did look through it, and that's certainly something, and I'll let you speak to that, but it's certainly something we can explore with the development team. They asked us to bring this forward. We have brought forward. So what really we're talking about here is, do you want to put a permanent commitment on the transfer fee for affordable attainable, officially call it out for that purpose? And if you do want to do that, we bring a resolution back that better articulates the details associated with that. The second would be, do you want to use the transfer fees to essentially offset those affordable attainable commitments? And I think from an equity standpoint, having Twin Buttes pay on their affordable attainable to a certain dollar value over time that is consistent with others at 16% makes some degree of sense. But it's certainly, again, it was part of a negotiation. It isn't clearly called out in the development agreement how we get there. There was discussion of units years back, never really came to be. Obviously, there's a piece of land in the mix as well that could be built on in some manner, or it could be a part of the land bank, and it could be divested, and those dollars could be invested in affordable attainable in another manner. So I think there's a great deal of latitude in terms of how we proceed. But I do believe it's important that we come to conclusion with Twin Buttes on some type of affordable attainable agreement so that they can kind of get on with their business. And I think that's as important of a matter as any, so that they know what they can project for in the future. And so with that, maybe I'll stop and I'll entertain some questions. Obviously, there's a lot of information presented in a very short amount of time and a short staff report. But again, this could be an introduction of the conversation as opposed to the end of it. But I set up the recommendations in here to give you multiple alternatives to work from. And if you choose, you can pick and choose from those in terms of what you might want to do tonight, or you may want to defer it entirely for more conversation or more analysis. That's clearly the council's decision. So I'll stop there and I'll let you ask questions.
I have a few thoughts, but I'll entertain questions from council for Kevin to get us started. And thanks for the clarification, Kevin, that we don't need. We can pick and choose from your 3 recommended actions, or if we come up with another mix, that would be appropriate. But you aren't looking for any official action. You're just looking for guidance mostly this evening, unless we're really comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, if you're comfortable with following the recommendations, that's certainly one alternative for you. But it's really at council's call as to how you want to proceed on this.
Excellent. And these are 3 distinct and separate recommendations, 1, 2, and 3. That included in our packet. That it's could be a combination of those, but likely more selection of one as a roadmap to give you a direction. So any questions of Kevin from council? Kim, you
So-
had some thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Kevin, I'm sorry it took me so long to get this out to you. It was something that I really had to think about. One of the challenges for me with the programs that we currently have is that we're not seeing units actually get developed. So we're not at a fairly accelerated process creating attainable units. We are creating affordable units, albeit probably slower than we'd like to, but at least it's happening. But we're not seeing the attainable units get developed. And by that, I mean the 80 to 120% of the household area median income, so that our workforce, people, our parents, our teachers, our police, our firefighters, city employees, anybody who work, our workforce is having trouble affording homes in our area or living units. I don't want to just make it stay with homes because I think it can be a mixed unit housing situation. But I'm really concerned about that. And so I'm wondering if in these kind of agreements, if we shouldn't take an approach where those units get built now instead of getting built 10 years from now, or waiting till we get a program together where we can land bank something, or we can do this, or we can do that. And I think we should do all of those things if we can. But I see an opportunity here to move our goals forward and to actually have units on the ground within a couple of years. If we do this well, and if the developers are interested in it. By doing so, we could release them from their commitment, or release them from a portion of their commitment, or really, whatever it is that we want to end up doing early. And we'd have 40 units or 50 units in the next couple of years. I also like the idea of having those built on that piece of property in Twin Buttes, because I think we should have mixed income developments. So to have the attainable housing in that unit, in that area, rather than selling that piece of property, having the kind of units that are built there now, which are wonderful and beautiful, but they're outside of that range that we're looking at, and trying to build those somewhere else, I think is going to be very challenging. So the proposal it's not even a proposal, it's just a concept, it's an idea that I put forward, and I called it something which, you know how I am. I come up with ideas and I try to push our limits and have us think outside the box a little bit and move us forward. So the idea that we could have a DASH program, which is a Durango Area Sustainable Housing Program, that focuses on this kind of thing. So the concept that I was looking at was incentivizing, and I really support the idea of incentivizing the developer to build units on this piece of property in exchange for having transfer fees go back to them to reimburse them to a certain level. The details of it, I don't know what it is. It's the concept of it. And with the idea that the city would supply the infrastructure. I know that there's already some infrastructure to that piece of property, but for each building, the tap fees, whatever, would be forgiven. And then the current transfer fees that we have would pay the water or sewer fund for what would have gone there. I mean, there's all sorts of options here. And I would really encourage that we look at how we make these kind of things happen sooner rather than later. I penciled in some numbers. They're, moderately accurate. I don't know. I think we have an opportunity here and I don't want to miss it.
Okay, can I might mention a couple of things. I think the original couple points of reference, Kevin, the original commitment of Twin Buttes was 105 units of affordable housing. Is that correctly?
There was a modification to the number of total units after a few years. So, but right now it is at 105. It was slightly less than that at the start.
Okay, so they're on the hook for 105 units. They also dedicated a parcel of land that Kevin mentioned for either that 105 units or another 105 units. But they've dedicated a chunk of land for affordable housing. So I would, the idea of a transfer fee kind of was generated out of Three Springs. Is that not? It's sort of an analogous to what creating a fund. And I like the term perpetuity, just because what that does over time is allow the city an income source for the city. And just as Kim has mentioned, historically that those funds collected have gone to the Homes Fund and been used for a lot of different things. I would like to think that with another source such as this, transfer fees collected, that we would actually become a more active participant in creating those homes, as you've identified, Kim, and get some units on the ground rather than just put that money into continuing the Homes Fund efforts. We would like to have a fund where we can actually partner and create some incentivized developers, either on that piece of land that exists up there, which I don't think we should let them use that for anything else but affordable housing, so that there is a site for them or somebody else to do that. But really, so number one, I think I like the idea of a transfer fee that goes on in perpetuity to offset their original attainable affordable commitment of 105 units at this point. Number two, I think the land stipulated for affordable housing should stay on their master plan as only that purpose, only to be used for that purpose. So just as your concern was, we don't have land other places in the community to build on. Let's keep it at that location on that designated property in Twin Buttes. And thirdly, to your concern, if the city had these funds, what do we do with them? And historically, those have gone to the Homes Fund, which is a good partner with the city, but not, I think it would allow us to create, one of the things I've thought a lot about is a housing division. So we can actively take an active role in the creation of affordable, attainable housing on other properties that the city of Durango owns. We don't have many of them, but we can certainly acquire and land bank and through urban rural discuss how we use airspace and those kinds of things to partner with developers. And if we had a little bit of money to do that with, to create hire staff, capable staff at the city of Durango to spend that money, this is one source that we would have to do that. So I'm not allergic to the idea of having this transfer fee, endorsing this transfer fee. They've offered it. They've come to us and said we'd do it. I think our question is really, do we want to let them off the hook for land? And but it seems like if we can keep the land and get this transfer fee, we can create something quick, rather than let them just go build not even 105 units and let them off the hook. I think is really short-sighted. I mean, this is something that can create a long-term housing response in our community if we have now two big players in the housing market, that being Twin Buttes or Three Springs and now Twin Buttes, feeding into a potential fund. We got some long-term funding that would sustain the city's participation in creation of housing over a longer term.
I know I just sent this out very, very recently, but did you have a chance to look at the proposal I made?
I just glanced through it and I want to see it one more time. Yeah, just make sure.
I have not. No, I haven't looked at anything today. Sorry.
That's okay. It's understandable. You're a candidate and you were in a forum today, which went very well for everyone. I think that, I'm not, in the proposal, I'm not proposing ending the transfer fees. I'm proposing that they remain. And what I'm trying to do is give us, because we don't have a housing department right now, we don't have an active RHA right now, Regional Housing Authority. And what we have is a homes fund, and we have a dearth of builders building units. So what I'm trying to do is jumpstart this and create a situation where we as the city do not actually have to do the building, do not actually have to do anything except get them to do it and get it jump started. Now, the question of whether or not say they do 50 units, whether or not that alleviates their 105 commitment. I'm not suggesting one way or the other, but the fact that if they do this and they do it within the next 2 to 4 years, that's a huge advance for us. And it might be worth letting go of some of the units that they're building, but we're maintaining a transfer fee. I think this is a huge opportunity to change the way we look at how we provide housing. And I just really like staff to take some time to consider whether or not something like this could work before we make decisions that are going to be in perpetuity and we won't have any control over them.
So if I
I'll
might
jump in.
May I just say, just real quickly, I'm going to reiterate that the transfer fee is already established, the money's coming in. It's just how we're using those dollars is what has not been really memorialized by the city council. So I just want to make sure that's, because it's a super important point here. And you could apply it to affordable, attainable in any manner.
I'd just like to jump in and thank Councilor Baxter for your thoughts this afternoon. I think they were an intriguing possibility of some options. And I would like to see staff actually give them some consideration and come back to us with, could these work or not? Maybe some modifications to your suggestions.
I would tag on to that without repeating everybody and everything and just suggest like I said, I have not seen the email from Kim today. So I'd love to have a chance to review that. But what I do know is that housing is a key element that we have listed in our under affordability. And we have it in there as one of our strategies to review our transfer fee agreements and our fair housing agreements. And this, I would agree with what everyone has said, that this is an opportunity to really review those before we take action. So I think we should slow down. I think we should carefully think about our options here and consider this as a very, an opportunity to make some headway. Hopefully, it would be great. I agree. I would love to see units built that are affordable and attainable there. I love the idea of the mixed use in the same development. I really like where we're going, so I'd love to continue exploring.
And may I make one more point, and that's we always tend to talk about housing in terms of ownership. And I think that we have to make certain that we're also looking at rental units that are fit within the affordable, attainable area. So I appreciate Councilor Baxter's comments, but I also want to make certain there's a whole population that at this moment, just getting an affordable rental unit would be wonderful for those people.
Well, yeah, I might add that that's my purpose in maintaining that property up there. And the rental market is largely addressed in our community with tax credit funded projects, starting with the Mercy projects up behind on north west of North Main, other projects on Gigline Gulch Road. Durango Housing Corp has 95 units of tax credit affordable rentals scattered throughout the community. Lumion 1, Lumion 2, the rentals of 2 senior housing projects now previously provided by VOA. Now the third one, a rental tax credit project out at Three Springs, developed by VOA using low-income housing tax credits. So I mean that's and lastly, the permanent supportive project of 40 units plus up at behind Mana Soup Kitchen are all rental projects. We've in Durango, Colorado, which is an amazing amount of tax credit funding injected into our community, brought to us by nonprofit developers. And usually the incentive for them to do so is free land. Not always free land, but often free land. And so that's my concern about not letting them get off the hook of allowing that stipulated land to, originally for affordable housing to be thrown back into the private market in any way, that be utilized and offered to nonprofit developers.
So if you've noticed, I did mention that the units should be restricted. And I love the whole list of everything that you just mentioned there, but the vast majority of that is affordable. It's not attainable if you want to move it up a notch. And we have a huge dearth of housing in that attainable category, the 80 to 120 household area median income range. And the problem that creates is that every time a house goes on the market, it skyrockets in price. And so everything that's below that is also rising. If we can fill that gap and bring things in at that level, we support our workforce, but we're also keeping all the units that are below that at those levels where people below that can afford them. And you've showed that so well that we have tax credit programs and other things to support affordable housing. We really don't have much to support attainable housing. And I think
or anything with that has to do with sales. Yeah, and but I support what you're saying, and those a little bit counter to what Barbara was just mentioning. You know, we do have. Those are rental units, everything I've defined that's created with low-income housing tax credit dollars. What you're describing, the 80 to 120 EMI is only achieved by private developers creating for sale properties. And the only way that they will be incentivized to do so, to sell them in that range, is if they're building on a piece of city dirt, or if we have a housing authority that in some way partners with them to make sure that they have that they will ultimately sell those houses in that range. Otherwise, they have.
Or if we work with Twin Buttes, so for them to do that on that piece of property right there with the incentives of the transfer fee as an important point in time. So.
Yeah, and like many developers, it's not their interest to do so. So I think that's what
you can make it in their interest to do so because it would fulfill their obligation. Possibly, there are ways to make this work, and I just would like us to explore them. That's all I'm asking.
No, I think it's great. Let's do that, and I think I'll throw it back to Kevin in terms of the urgency of. What is Twin Buttes expecting of action of council, and what the timeliness of that action might be from their expectation?
Right. So there's a couple things. This has been, can we say, languishing for several years, particularly now that they're up and developing. You know, when their development team was evolving to different people, there wasn't as much conversation going on, but certainly the last 3 years or so, there's been a lot of conversation about this issue, and their interest is to try to pin down what it is that their commitment is going to be and move on to other things. There's a number of other documents that we're working with them on relative to codes and standards and some other things about the development that we're also trying to work through. So I think we should have a goal of trying to come to some conclusion in, let's say, in the coming months. Obviously, the makeup of the council will be a little bit different here in a few months, but I don't know that that's problematic, quite frankly. I mean, we need to find the right solution that's comfortable for the council, whoever's seated at the council, before we come to agreement. Now, I will say, though, that the issue of the open question of the transfer fee and whether you want to make a formal commitment to how to use those dollars, that is on the table this evening as well. And it doesn't have to tie to the Twin Buttes agreement necessarily tonight. And so one of the recommendations is, do you want to consider whether you want to say, yes, these are for affordable, attainable housing purposes? You certainly don't have to do that tonight. This has also been kind of, sitting with uncertainty for quite some time. That being said, the dollars have been set aside in a segregated account at the city. We haven't been spending those dollars. They are accumulating. And so there's no true urgency on that item either. So, and the third recommendation was just relative to allowing the city manager to finalize the agreement. I think given what we heard tonight, clearly this needs to come back for more conversation with the council, whomever is sitting on the dais at that time, to make sure we have something that everyone's comfortable with. I know that Twin Buttes has said, and they said it in their proposal, they prefer not to build units at this point in time. That doesn't mean we can't go back to them and have a conversation more in line with what Councilor Baxter has shared, which is a little bit of a different scenario than, you know, the program that was going on in Three Springs a few years ago that wasn't working. We have a set aside of a piece of land. We have some dollars coming in over quite a course of time. And there may be some other alternatives that haven't been considered. And I'm happy to go back to staff as well as obviously the development team and see what their thoughts are on this and get some feedback for council at some point moving forward. And again, I don't expect necessarily that I'll be before you in 2 weeks with a Twin Buttes proposal, but certainly in the next couple of months, I think we most certainly could have something that we come back and it's the next conversation on this particular item.
Kevin, thank you. I'd just like to clarify that I'm in no rush to make a decision tonight. I think Councilor Baxter's questions merit some exploration. And not that I want us to languish longer, but I also believe that it's a significant enough decision and discussion that I would really welcome your discussion with staff and with the developers and coming back with something that might seem a compromise here.
Kevin, I want to say thank you too. And I also want to suggest to Dean's concern, because I agree that and there may be an issue for the Twin Buttes developers to take this on, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't be a different developer with the same scenario.
Exactly, Kim. And I don't know what their disposition is. I only said that because they brought this to us initially, so it's apparent that they were trying to gain consideration for setting up this transfer fee in lieu of creating those units, which does open up the opportunity for another developer to utilize. And that's why I didn't want to lose the dirt either in this deal. I wanted to have another developer, which is, I thought there was conversations headed in that direction actually. So we might, Kevin, I guess I was going to ask if it rose to the level of perhaps a study session. Not next week is probably full, but the 2 weeks subsequent to that, that'd be 3 weeks from tonight, to try to squeeze representatives of the development of the Twin Buttes to come and visit with us to understand their motivation.
They would welcome that opportunity to have a sitting with the council to share their perspective on this, as well as if we have a couple of weeks here to talk through some alternatives. Certainly would be happy to do just that. Having the item the way it was set up tonight as an administrative item obviously didn't leave much opportunity for the Twin Buttes folks to step to the plate and share their thoughts on it. But we did include their proposal in the packet. But I'm happy to go back and talk with them about alternatives to getting to their obligation of 16%. And I think we have a lot of different alternatives to consider, including Councilor Baxter's suggestion, which I will certainly tomorrow share with their team.
I'd like to think that we can take action on this before changing of the guard in end of April is my goal. Timeline, any urgency, it's a self-imposed urgency, but I think the team that we have now of counselors understand these issues, and I wouldn't want it to languish through another learning curve. If we can come to some consensus on this before the end of April, that would be wonderful. So.
Well, we'll do what we can to see if we can find something that is amenable or agreeable to the development team, and we can certainly shoot for that.
Thank you, Kevin. If there's no other discussion on this particular one, we officially have punted on any formal action, and look forward to those further discussions. And thank you, Kevin, for making all those clarifying statements. And if there's no other discussion on that, we can move on. I don't want to going. Any other final comments? Okay, we'll move on to 12.4, which is the city update from the city manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just have a short update, just a couple of responses to some public input that we've received. about alleys, and then some of the comments that we have on the ballot measure. So I'll ask Amy to respond to some of those comments that we received, and then Levi to follow Amy.
Certainly. So just a quick breakdown regarding the Tabor pro and con statements received. The city received a total of 24 comments by the noon deadline on February 19th, and the comments were divided into 3 categories. Pro statements for question 1A, con statements for question 1A, and statements received from community members who are not registered electors of the city. In the pro category, 16 comments were received, and of that number, 9 were completely in favor of the increase in lodger's tax on a referred measure or question 1A, while 7 comments shared both pro and con assertions in their single submittal. In the con category, 10 comments were received, and of that number, 3 completely opposed question 1A, while again 7 shared both pro and con arguments. The 7 comments received, consisting of both pro and con arguments, favored a lodger's tax increase, but opposed the allocation specified in the ballot question. The third category was comments received from community members who are not registered electors of the city. Of the 5 comments received in this category, all were in favor of question 1A. The 3 file sets were sent to the city's outside bond and Tabor attorney, D. Weiser, and he compiled the summaries for the pro and con statements that residents will see in the Tabor notice that'll be sent on Friday. Staff believes that Mr. Weiser did a very thorough and equitable compilation of each summary, resulting in 499 words for each statement or each summary. The Tabor amendment allows pro and con summaries to consist of up to 500 words. 8,573 Tabor notices will be sent to registered elector households this Friday, March the 5th, and approximately 15,500 ballots are set to be mailed to all active city registered electors on March 19th. So with that, if you have any questions, that was just giving you a breakdown of the pro and con statements that we received.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Any questions of Ms. Phillips? That was a pretty amazing inquiry and compilation. So thank you for that. And thanks everybody for weighing in. That's a pretty good response from that inquiry. Councilor Baxter, did you have a question?
I thought that was a great presentation and did a good job of answering the questions of how the process works and how things end up on the ballot. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
And we look forward to people making their choice on the ballot. That's all we can say is come out and vote. Any other items on the city update?
No, sir. We are good. Oh, I'm sorry, Levi. There's one more, Levi, with a couple updates on some alley projects or some alley questions that we received.
Good evening, Dean, Mayor Brookie, and members of council. Levi Lloyd, Director of Operations. Wanted to address specifically a question regarding the alley between 28th and 29th on the west side of Main. There was a question regarding change of use. And I wanted to give some background. So that alley, the city of Durango actually only owns about a 5-foot strip of that alley. The remainder of that alley is privately held. This winter, the barricade that is erected is on private property. This winter, that barricade was hit by a driver and knocked down. We talked with the property owner about going in and doing some cleanup for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. He asked us to remove the barricade that had been knocked down. We have subsequently entered into negotiations with the owner of that property to acquire the entire alley cross section. so that we can do improvements to the alley. We will be paving the alley, making it better pedestrian and bicycle traffic. We'll also be erecting a new barricade across there that would control and eliminate motorized traffic through there, which is the intended use, but still provide pedestrian and bicycle traffic. And it gives us control by negotiating with the property owner. It's a piece of property that we've been looking for a number of years, so that we can do these improvements. And he has indicated that he is willing to work with us to acquire that piece of property. So if you have any questions or need further clarification, I'm happy to answer them.
Levi, I just want to just confirm that I understood you correctly, because the majority of the comments were concerned about the increase in vehicular traffic through there and causing some problems for pedestrians and bicyclists. And I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly, that there will be barriers going back up at some point in time that will alleviate that concern.
That's correct. Multimodal is going to be doing a public outreach to the neighborhood to talk about what they want that pedestrian and bike traffic to look like. And then city operations, once we're actually in the process of getting that surveyed, we will go in and erect a new barrier that restricts motorized access. It would probably be something that has a 6-foot gap in it. That's typically wide enough for bikes and handlebars to get through, and that's the standard size of a bike lane on streets. We would have a 6-foot gap, and then the rest would be a fence that the city of Durango would have control over. We would be able to open and close that gate to do things like snow plowing and trash and recycling pickup, but then close that gate, so it would be a restricted access. And then we're also going to be installing some signage. One of the issues that we have is that where the barricade goes, we still have to provide access to the owner of 2815 Main. So that's further down the alley. And what's happening now is people, the barricade was not very visible. They would think they could get down that alley. They would pull down the alley and then have to stop and back up onto 28. So we're going to let people know with some signage at 28th that they should turn on at 28th rather than proceeding down the alley. And then the barricade that we erect will have some reflective, it'll be painted a bright yellow, and it'll have some reflective signage on it as well, indicating that it is a closed alley.
That sounds like a great solution. Thank you, Levi.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Levi. Both of those are questions that you've answered for me as well. In terms of trash vehicle access and limited city vehicles would be able to use that new point of connectivity. I'm pretty familiar with that. That's my alley for a decade or so as well, or my neighborhood. So I can appreciate it, and it was thanks for that, and hopefully that'll alleviate some of the concerns of the neighbors in that immediate vicinity. So appreciate it. And any other items on the city update?
No, sir. That's it.
All right. Very, very good. Well, we'll move on to council reports and actions, agenda item 13. And so entertain anybody if we want to just go around. Mayor Pro Tem, you got any council reports and actions for us this evening?
Can I wait for a little bit?
You absolutely may. Yeah.
Let someone else go first.
Okay. Well, then, Melissa, do you have any?
I had to try to think of what I had. We just had a meeting last night that was really wonderful, and I just want to touch on it briefly because we'll be back in touch with council on this, so I don't want to take a lot of time. But Strategy and Long-Term Finance Committee had a really great meeting with Cynthia last night, and Kim, Mayor Pro Tem Baxter, was in attendance as well, which was great because they're going to be ultimately making some great recommendations to council on some, in this case, it's general fund reserve policy recommendation. And then they're going to be looking at all sorts of different policies. So it's coming down the pipeline. I just wanted to report that they're doing really good work. It's very helpful to have Cynthia there, and we'll be in touch with more details later, but it will take some staff or some council time and review once we get these recommendations. Just to warn you.
Excellent. Duly warned. Councillor Newsworthy, if I could ask you, you got, I'm sure, a list, but if I can ask you to report in on our selection of new appointees to the CRC as well.
Sure, and I attended that meeting. So last week, we, as a council, chose to bring on board Trini Collins, who is a member of the Southern Ute tribe, Enrique Orzoco, and Jennifer Latham. And so those are 3 new members of the Community Relations Commission. We met on Wednesday. We reached a decision on Tuesday. They were notified, and in less than 24 hours, they showed up for their first commission meeting. And we talked about several things, including the commission's kind of strategic plan for the coming year. But one of the key takeaways was really involving the commission early on in the process when any entity that the city is working with, or the city itself, thinking about planning, strategic planning. They cited 2 examples most recently where entities that receive funding from the city have brought their plans to them kind of at the 11th hour, and it's much better to just start in early. So that's a request for all of us to think about as we're working with different groups. There was also a comment I noticed from the public. There was an article in the paper today about that commission, and there was outreach we recognize that there's no one representing the disabled community, although we do have people on the multimodal working with that, focusing on that community. There was some outreach. We need to do more, and so we recognize that still is a goal, is to really round out that commission. So good meeting. We'll be doing more listening sessions coming up and working on some issues. I'm also aware of some efforts within among advocates, particularly in the Latinx community, to address issues of vaccination and what's important, maybe some misinformation or just incorrect information. So those efforts are also underway. They're not necessarily tied to the Community Relations Commission, but they are going on. I also did want to follow up. Last week, I raised the question of whether or not we as a council wanted to think about some way that we permanently recognize this year of COVID, and particularly all the different community members who came together to help, and like we said last week, frontline workers and San Juan Basin Public Health and all the volunteer effort. So I did not want us, we may not decide that tonight, but I do want us to think about that. And I wanted to end with, I think you guys know that Saturday vaccine effort is really important to me. And I had such an honor. There was a 98, she'll be 99 this month, woman who called the Durango Transit, rode on the transit vehicle in a wheelchair. The driver brought her into the La Plata County Fairgrounds, and she was vaccinated. I was chatting with the driver, and I said, my goodness, first of all, the value of public transit and how people depend on public transit. And what a statement, a 98, almost 99-year-old coming in on public transit and getting her vaccine. So it was just a great day. She gave permission to have her photo taken, and I have shared it with the city manager, should you guys choose to feature that in any way.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much. And yeah, good report out. And I want to make sure that we have all the options for vaccination posted on our website. There is a pretty concise list on how you can do that. It's public should know that La Plata County is one of the best counties in the state. We're approaching 70% for those people 65 and older, which is a pretty amazing statistic. And Colorado is doing fairly well nationwide, and so that puts La Plata County in a real good stead for achieving herd immunity in any kind of timely fashion. So, and it's due to those things like Barbara just explained, and we've got a couple counselors working with that entity, and I know Mercy Medical is also any customer or patient of Centura Health System can easily schedule an opportunity to be vaccinated there. We're doing a number of outreach programs through San Juan Basin Health Department. So please check in on these websites through San Juan Basin Health Department, or we'll make sure those are posted on the City of Durango website as well. It's pretty easy. It's not exactly timely. You might have to wait a while till your age group comes up. But other than that, they seem to be coming our way, and they are available so far. So, and I think they're only going to become more available as time goes on. So look forward to that. I'll just end with an update from the Airport Commission. As was in today's paper, great news. We now have not only in addition to American and United Airlines, we now have Delta Airlines serving Durango, Colorado, with a daily nonstop to Salt Lake City and beyond. So that creates another critical link for air traffic out of our community to the Pacific Northwest, the West Coast, and a lot of places I go to a lot. So I'll be a frequent flyer, I'm sure, on that route. It's been a long time in coming, and really happy to see that they were excited about the opportunity in Durango enough to make that investment to serve our community. So look forward to it, and welcome Delta Airlines. With that, we've got any other addenda items we need to talk about?
Dean?
Kim, you're back.
I do have two items, but I was wondering if you wanted to speak to one of them as the mayor, which was on February 17th, we had the Employee Awards Kickoff event.
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead and talk about that. That was great fun. Thank you for joining me, and you can discuss it a little bit. Go ahead and talk about that.
As mayor, I think it's something that you should discuss. I got to be there. I was honored to be able to be there, but I think it should be your conversation.
It was, we recreated, actually staff recreated virtually a really difficult thing to do, which is express from City Council appreciation of our staff, over 350 employees, from high-level management to all the service workers and everybody in between. And so we were able to pull together an amazing amount of door prizes, gifts, and a number of awards were presented to our city employees. And it was great fun. I was able to do it 4 years ago as mayor, and this time Mayor Pro Tem Baxter was able to join me in pulling names out of a hat. We got the easy job. The hard job was not actually having an award to give to every single employee that was able to participate. So we had great attendance. Usually this is an event held at the rec center or the library, and this time it was held virtually. And I'd like to thank Jose Madrigal for being essentially the master of ceremonies and keeping the dialogue running, and everybody keeping us all entertained for a period of a couple hours while we recognize those workers in our community. So it was really great. Really appreciate all our staff as always. That's one of the things as mayor I'm going to miss is not having an opportunity to thank our employees year after year. But I'm sure you'll do a good job next year. And with that, I'll pass on the torch. I also want to, while Kim's up, I want to suggest that she's going to help me out tomorrow and do the video of the council connection. I'll be traveling tomorrow, and so I will be not able to do our weekly or every 2 week video synopsis of this particular meeting, which will run on DGov for the next 2 weeks. So Kim, thank you for helping me out with that little task. And with that, I'm sure you have another council report in action that you thought of.
Sure, thank you. So just to let Victor know, just get in touch with me and I'll be there tomorrow morning. I prefer before 9 o'clock if possible. I did want to say that as we've discussed numerous times, we have a city council election coming up in April. And we have seven candidates running for 3 open spaces. And one of the best things you can do is be an informed voter and make your vote count so that you are contributing to what the vision of Durango looks like in the future. So I would like to suggest that there are 3 forums that are coming up. So on Thursday of this week is the Chamber of Commerce Eggs and Issues. On Monday of next week is the Local First Forum. And then on March 22nd is the League of Women Voters Forum. And you can go to any of those websites to find out more information. I think all of them require a pre-registration and they're all virtual. So we had one today also, which had great attendance. And in some ways, Zoom is fabulous for this because we get everyone heard. All the candidates get to be heard. And I think that's wonderful. It's great democracy in action. So thank you for participating.
As someone who's keenly aware of the forums, I would add that there is one more forum also happening. Thank you for the announcement, Kim. On March 8th, and it's a virtual candidate forum on homelessness and affordable housing that is being put on by Nina and the Interfaith Alliance. And it is from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And off the top of my head, I don't have registration information, but I'm sure it's available on their websites.
And it doesn't conflict with the Local First one?
Correct. They have confirmed it's Thursday night and Local First is Monday night. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, and again, I would like to think that we can encapsulate all 4 of these forums and registration links on our city website. So if it's not already, I anticipate that it probably is, but I haven't checked. So we will, in the future, I can anticipate that you can find these on our city website under elections. So, and with that, if there's any other addendum items that we need to talk about relative to our upcoming meetings, or any thoughts in that regard? Hearing none, I think it's now 9:14 and we can adjourn this meeting of Durango City Council.